Hi, and welcome to another week of Bible study. We hope that you've been enjoying this journey with us as we look and explore the main topic of anxiety and how collectively, with our faith and focus on God, we're able to manage and maneuver in an everyday fashion. So, welcome again. And so, the counseling team from Alfred Street Baptist Church, we're back so that we can have a follow up and a continuing discussion that will leave you with some additional information about anxiety disorders and tools and tips, specific tools and tips to help navigate and manage anxiety. So thank you for joining us on this evening. So let's start with some things that we know. What we know that anxiety is real. This is not anything that you've made up, you've thought of. This is anxiety is real. It's something that, as we know, we've put a number to it, 3 in 1, 1 in 3 persons struggle with. And so we know that it is a very common disorder. We did our best to normalize it because we want you to be able to have the courage and strength to discuss, talk about, and make space for however this resonates with you. And so this is what we know. We know that anxiety is real, right? We know that anxiety is connected to underprocessed fear, among other causes. But one of the main ones that we see, particularly in our counseling setting, that there's a lot of unprocessed fear, and that fear often is the driving motivator and factor when anxiety is very present. We also know that anxiety can induce a very strong visceral response. And so when we talk about visceral, that's like down in the gut, right? Mm-hmm. Down in your stomach, like that sick feeling. Oftentimes people describe it as just down in the, like, I feel like something is wrong inside. So what we know is that anxiety can induce a very strong visceral response. And when we talk about visceral, we're talking about a very strong, deep internal response. A lot of people refer to it as, I feel it in my gut. So there's a lot of emotion. Some people even call it butterflies, right? We've heard that they feel it internally more so externally. We know also that anxiety can induce very strong somatic and physical responses. And so that's when you physically feel sick. And it is because of the overload of the emotional and mental stress. We also know that anxiety can certainly, truly, definitively be biblically traced. We find anxiety in the Old Testament and the New Testament. No book is left out, right? No book left behind. We are able to trace language and narrative related to anxiety from King David and before, Jesus and beyond, right? Mm-hmm. And so we want to be able to just, again, to help us normalize it in a sense where we become familiar, comfortable, and are able to have these conversations around this very significant topic.
Yeah, and what I wanted to kind of say about the physical responses that sometimes take people off guard, the changes in your breathing. I know some people have reported it felt like they were having a heart attack. Mm-hmm. So knowing that those can also be symptoms of having, more elevated levels of anxiety. Yeah. You start to sweat. The physical discomfort in your stomach. So I think that's another thing to kind of highlight that you may have some physical changes in how you breathe, which is very scary for a lot of people. And like the palpitations of your heart, racing heart rate, things like that. So adding that to what may physically be changing when you're experiencing some anxiety.
And if I can add, on the one point about the butterflies, mm-hmm. I think you and I talked about it some time ago. In the body, you actually have a nerve that extends from the back of it stems from your brainstem, from mm-hmm. the back of your neck, and it runs throughout the body. So it runs through our upper torso. Mm-hmm. So when that nerve is activated, or when an event occurs and that nerve is the central nervous system is mm-hmm. activated, that nerve that I'm talking about, the vagus nerve, is the one that needs to be stimulated in order to reduce or mitigate some of the symptoms that Marcia expressed.
Yeah. And so we're going to talk about, I know a lot of people have been chiming in, and we appreciate your discussion and joining us through this conversation. They can't wait until we start talking about the tools and the tips. And so we're going to get there on this evening. So thank you. That's going to help us segue right into that. So just so that you know, the combined research of psychology and faith maintain that religion in general, religious training, spirituality, faith, prayer, and church-based social support all are associated in a very positive way with reducing anxiety and stress. And also, it's noted in the research that depression is helped as well. And so this is why it is so important for us to make sure that we have this conversation merging our faith and our mental wellness and our mental health. So hashtag mental health, hashtag faith and mental health, hashtag like all of them, right? Because all of them matter. And especially for us as we're on our Christian journey, the center of it all is God. And God is the force. God is the one. God is the person that helps us to be able to manage and move in a way that will give us this life that we keep talking about, right? This life and that more abundantly, right? So let's talk a little bit about anxiety disorders. So something that we use pretty frequently in the therapy realm, and let me just stop and make my disclosure. This is not a session. That's the point. This is a conversation. And so its purpose is to be educational. And so what we would love for you to be able to do is walk away from this conversation and say, you know what? Maybe I'll call my medical doctor. Some of the things that they've talked about, I think I'm experiencing. Start with your medical doctor. Have a frank and open and honest conversation. They have to abide by laws and rules of confidentiality, and just as we do. And so that is a great place to begin. From there, you can talk about your symptoms, what you are experiencing, and from there, discuss what might be best for you. We'll talk a bit in a moment about medication management. We'll talk about maybe even if you decide with your doctor. So don't make the decision alone, okay? You could decide with your doctor that perhaps you'd like to have a psychological evaluation. And I would recommend, honestly, everyone do it like your regular physical, at least once a year. If it's not a full workup, right, at least kind of have that conversation with a therapist and check in, right? And so have that conversation with your doctor. This is not a therapy session, but we definitely want to give you as much information as we can while you merge this with your faith and allow God to help guide and direct your steps.
Can I say something about checking in with your physician?
Yeah.
Specifically with women, when you have your annual exam with your gynecologist or OB/GYN, that is an excellent way to start this conversation. I know in a lot of my circles, that's where a lot of women that I know, that front line, that's when they've started to talk to their physician. That does not eliminate talking to your primary care physician, but a lot of times women feel more intimately connected with their OB/GYN.
Yeah.
And so that's a great place to start and open up that door if you're having some of these symptoms and these feelings. They can sometimes recommend a mental health professional, or they may recommend some other tools and techniques, and that's a great front line and, for women.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the same goes for men.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't know any OB/GYNs, but no, that's a great point. I mean, for men, some years ago, the hot topic was African American men not being tested for prostate cancer.
Yeah.
Right. So, being one of those, I would encourage.
Personal moment.
No, I would encourage anyone. Absolutely. No,
Yeah.
I would encourage anyone,
Yeah.
especially people that look like me.
Yeah.
When you have that opportunity to speak about, what you're really feeling, then
Yeah.
take advantage.
Yeah. Having those high level exams, certainly, I mean, they mitigate a lot of anxiety in many people. And in some, so much so that they won't even go and have the appointment. And so we definitely encourage you as you take care of your whole self, right? So therapy is not just about the mental, it is a holistic approach so that you'll take care of your whole self, because we are a whole being, right? And so God wants and needs us to do that and have that care and attention. So do what you need to do. Make sure that you check in where you need to check in. But no, this is not a therapy session. This is certainly specifically just for information, all right? And so with that in mind, there is a book that we consider to be our Bible. So next to our Holy Bible, we have our DSM. Oh, the DSM. Yeah, DSM. And so the DSM allows us to review disorders, and then it gives us specific information to help us offer a diagnosis for a particular condition. And so for every licensed professional counselor, psychiatrist, psychologist, the DSM is definitely something that they use on a regular basis. And so in that, we find the category of anxiety, which is, believe it or not, divided into 11 different disorders. And so we won't go into all of them on this evening, but we'll highlight a few that we feel like are pretty high on the list, pretty normal in this environment, and ones that you would readily recognize if you heard it. And so generalized anxiety, that would be kind of the number one. If we had to rank them, and please, if you disagree, jump in. Referred to as GAD, GAD, generalized anxiety. And that's the diagnosis that outside of everything else, that your anxiety is not induced by medication, substance abuse. There's also a caveat for extreme circumstances, and that's where we get into PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, would come this diagnosis for generalized anxiety. What would you say would be next? Maybe panic attacks?
Well, I'm
social.
I'm thinking, yes, ma'am, because that's kind of what I've been dealing with here lately.
Okay. So social anxiety social disorder. Anxiety.
Yeah. Yep. Think about it. Most of us have been locked away. You know, we've been at our homes and people are working from home. And now that schools and offices and other places are opening up, I spoke with a student last week that said, you know, he felt socially awkward. Like he didn't know, like, should I engage? Do I not engage? Should I put my mask on? They're not wearing them, you know, and so it created a lot of anxiety for him.
Yeah, and I think the social anxiety has increased, especially in our younger population, for a variety of reasons. COVID including, but even outside of that, just they're learning to socialize differently. There's so much technology that when it comes to interpersonal socialization, they really have a struggle with that of how do I interact on a verbal basis instead of with technology. So a lot of our youth are having social anxiety with just being able to socialize, go to school and interact, having to talk to their peers, talk to the teachers, in addition to adults. But I see a lot of increased social anxiety with our youth.
Yeah, I live with the social butterfly. You both have met her. And the pandemic certainly was difficult for her because she longed to be with friends in her environment, classroom environment, teachers. And so when we got word that class was in session, listen, it was a party in my house. She was ready to go back to school. And so it could be so quick, quickly onset that someone that generally would not struggle, right, with it, would find themselves in a position where, especially in this pandemic, where they are struggling socially to either reintegrate or adjust to the circumstances that they find themselves in. So then now I'll interject panic.
Panic.
And so that goes into what you talked about earlier, Marcia, feeling like you're having a heart attack, feeling severe heart palpitations, sweating, really, just outside of your normal realm of activity and physical well-being. People lose, shorter breath. It kind of mimics an asthma attack in some instances. And its onset can be triggered just about anything, right? Definitely high levels of being nervous or worried about something, being in the presence of a particular person.
Yes.
Persons are going in for an interview. Instead of that energy and anxiety helping them, it unfortunately works against them. Right. And they find it hard to talk. Their throat, people describe their throats closing. Right. Having such nervousness that their hands tremble and shake. And so it's a combination of symptoms, but one disorder that is certainly high on the familiarity list. And more often than not, people have experienced this. And so this, again, is one of those situations that you would likely go to your doctor and say, something's wrong with me. I don't know what's happening. I keep having instances where my heart is beating fast and et cetera. And so panic disorder certainly would round out our top three. And then let's see. We talked about panic disorder and then panic attack.
Well, okay. What I was going to say, as far as the panic disorders, something closely related to it would be phobias. Is what I was. Yeah. Because if I don't know what's going on, and let's say I go to the doctor, that specifically the doctor is going to ask, well, when did it happen? What was going on? And you may find out that there's, something that triggers that panic.
That's right.
Yeah, that might be subconscious.
Yeah.
And the panic attacks can be situational. So that's another thing to kind of think in terms of if you're trying to decide, do I have a disorder? Am I just having random attacks? I had a situation last week where a family friend had a panic attack. It was the first time this has ever happened, but she's dealing with an end-of-life situation with her mother. And so she was awakened out of her sleep, couldn't breathe, and just complete panic, crying, and things like that. And so, we were talking through it, and I said, this has never happened. This is situational, but be mindful that as you're going through stressful situations, like you said, worrisome things, processing fear, right? Because that was what we got to, right? I had to say, what's the underlying fear?
Exactly.
Right? And she was like, oh, I've never thought of that before. You know what I mean? And so situational situations, it could be isolated, it could be multiple things. So just knowing, and some people don't even know the triggers.
That's right.
Sometimes you might have a trigger like, I'm afraid, not me, but I'm afraid, this is an example, I'm afraid to drive over bridges, which is a phobia and a fear.
That's right.
But that causes panic for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
So just kind of evaluating and knowing, okay, when do I need to talk to a professional about it and work through it so that those things are not inhibiting you from, moving forward in whatever way you need to in terms of, enjoying life or moving to the next step.
Absolutely.
That's interesting that she said bridge, because I have a young lady that I work with, and she came up with a song that she starts singing. And she sings her way right on across the right. I was like, go for it. She sings her way right across the Bay Bridge. So,
that's the fear of driving over the bridge or bridges is big.
It is big.
Flying.
Absolutely.
Flying in general, flying in a small plane. Speak from my own experience.
That sounds like a personal story.
Right.
The small plane. That was my own little, full disclosure. I really don't have a history of panic disorder or anxiety attacks, things like that. But listen, I had my own experience back in August. I had to fly on a plane, 12-passenger plane. And that was a whole situation. And really going into it, being in the situation, coming out of it, and then having to do it again. mentally, I know everything you're supposed to do. I've got all the tools and techniques. And going, I was fine. Coming back, it was a whole different situation. So that's where I'm like, you just never know, what's going to happen.
Yeah, and how significant it will impact you.
And I'm, faith-based. So, I'm on the plane, like, if y'all don't know Jesus, y'all gonna know him by the time we get off this plane.
Listen.
But while I'm breathing and doing visualization, like I'm doing
and praying,
all these things.
Right?
Yes, praying.
A lot of that.
Praying out loud, praying everything. It was like, what is wrong with her? But just knowing again,
nothing at all. You were managing your anxiety.
But knowing again that these things happen. And just for me, it happens to those who are believers.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And there's nothing wrong with you as a believer to say, I've had this or I'm struggling with that.
That's
so
right.
just kind of, again, maybe circling back to normalizing it is that, I'm praying while I'm having my little panic attack.
That's right. That's right. And the prayer and the combination of tools will help you get through it.
Right.
I know, just adding to an example, a person that was deathly afraid of crossing bridges, so much so it evolved into a business. Like she was able to establish a service.
Oh, like an escort service?
An escort service that would meet you at one end, carry you across. You pay your money, and now, I mean, listen, she's got a little side hustle happening.
That's amazing.
Yes, and so she hasn't gotten to the place where she's able to do the drive, but she can do the ride, right? And so anxiety is, so this helps us kind of look at it from a standpoint where there's the levels to this thing, okay? And everybody isn't at the same level, and everyone doesn't experience it the same way, and that's okay. Wherever you find yourself, like God will meet you and there is help for you. So please walk away from this conversation informed and equipped to take care of your whole self. And we see kind of this gradual level of anxiety throughout Scripture. We have Jeremiah lamenting so much in Lamentations, which happens to be one of my favorite scriptures, chapter 3. I mean, he is just, at his wit's end with God about his surroundings and what's happening and the loss and the grief and the weight of it all. I mean, even David finding himself in the cave, just wondering if Saul is going to get in and end his life, right? We talked about Elijah.
Right. I was just going to share, a few years ago, I had my own issues with anxiety, right? And could not sleep. It got to the point where I was fearful of the night. Like I would be fine during the day, but going home, and like getting in the bed, it was like, oh my God, that just would stir up some anxiety. So I was told at that time to go and read Psalms 119, all 176 verses. So when I would go home.
What a prescription.
Right. When I would go home and I try to lay down, I would typically like nod off, but then when I would wake up and the anxiety would start, I started reading.
Yeah.
And the thing that I found was that, there were parts in that scripture that helped me. Because I needed to know, that God was there, it says, I think protect me, and that's what I needed at that time, and I would fall back to sleep, I might wake up, and I did that for about a week. And then the first night that I slept through the night, it was like that morning, it was like a party because I was like, I can do it now.
Yes.
I can sleep all night.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
There's victory on the other side.
Absolutely.
Listen, that'll preach. You ready?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
That's
ma'am.
amazing. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And that kind of helps us segue right into tools and tips. Prayer is as a believer, prayer is at the top of my list. It often is yes, it is a grounding, it's a connecting, but it's also that thing that helps me be relational with God. And so in moments of stress, and so I'll share with now everyone, there are moments where I struggle with insomnia. And so my go-to, I've added a new one here lately. You'll probably be happy to hear. But my go-to is prayer. And then now I've added listening to the sound of rain on my cell phone to help me go to sleep. And so the deeper level of that is that this fear of loneliness that I have. And so, I'm a single mom. It's A-Marie and I. A-Marie sleeps like a rock. So God forbid if anything ever happened, she'd wake up the next day and be like, why you all roughed up? What happened? Right. Me, on the other hand, I'm kind of concerned about the well-being of the two of us and our two fur babies. And so sometimes, not as often as I've had in the past, I struggle with insomnia, and at the root of that is this fear of loneliness. And so I've been able to manage that pretty well with scripture and prayer, and then a good therapist. And so I have a good therapist that I've been working with. We haven't touched it just yet, but it's on the list. And that's another thing about therapy. You don't have to do everything at rapid horse race pace. Right. Just pick one thing, start, and just go slow. And eventually it will start to unfold. And so that's what I'm uncovering. But I've uncovered that not with my therapist. I uncovered that by sitting in silence.
That's an excellent.
Yeah.
Strategy. I love silence.
Sitting in silence and being comfortable with what comes up for me while I'm still and while it's quiet.
Yeah.
And so I have now started to just envision what I would like in rest, how I would like to sleep through the night uninterrupted, or if I'm interrupted, how I would like to just peacefully fall back asleep. And the imagery really helps to bring this peace and this calmness. And then when you fold in the Lord, and sometimes I just do the 23rd Psalm, like I learned that when I was 2, right? But it hits differently when you need it in those moments, and you repeat it so slow. And so I can hear myself just kind of, the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. I'm going to record a whole situation, right?
That's a whole meditation.
A whole meditation, right? And when I do that, folding in that word, and then I just begin to pray, before I know it, it's morning. And I've rested well, and all is well in the world of sleep. And I
like the fact that you incorporate imagery. That's one of the things that I stress with the clients I work with, is what does it look like for you? What are you seeing, and what are you thinking about what you're seeing? So we talk a lot about perspective and also perception. Perception is what you see. Perspective is what you think about what you see. So using imagery is a great tool, for looking at it, because you said the main, sometimes the fear and anxiety is what's going to happen.
That's right.
So that's the vision that you have. That's what you're thinking about.
Exactly.
So it's important to reframe that thought.
That's right.
Like you said, that fear of loneliness is like, okay, well, what's the thought behind that thought?
That's right. That's right.
And that's the unfolding of how we're thinking. And we'll bring that up later.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, and so that's where cognitive behavioral therapy comes into play. And I'm sure my therapist will be ready to move in that way, helping me to do this unfolding and uncovering, because in short, cognitive behavioral therapy says what you think manifests in what you do. So if you think it, your action is going to be reflective of that. And so if you don't like how your actions have shown up, right, then you've got to do some work with this thought processing. Everything isn't so black and white, right or wrong. Like you got to give some room for the other stuff.
One of the first things that I like to do with clients is discuss cognitive disorders. Distortions, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we discuss, what's the distortion? Are you jumping to conclusions? Are you mind reading? Are you fortune telling? Are you thinking black and white? So as we look at those distortions,
Is it an unmanaged expectation?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. So as we look at those, now we're able to, either reframe, challenge, or refocus whatever that thought is.
Yeah. So collectively, the tools and the tips, the various tools and tips, they should be integrative, right? It shouldn't be just one or the other. Again, we want to look at this from a holistic standpoint, and some holistic ideas. Definitely, we want to kind of take some of the stigma off of that when it comes to like mindfulness, yoga. So talk about that for a moment. Yeah. And I defer to you because I know this is this is her love.
Right. Yeah, that's
her heart outside of her.
Right.
In addition, I think specifically in our community, and in the spiritual realm, it's really important for us to tap into a variety of tools and techniques in addition to our spirituality. Mm. And so one of my passions is literally like trying to destigmatize mental health in our community in addition to some of these holistic practices. Yeah. So things like yoga and meditation, mindfulness, and using all of those tools, right? I am that person. I kind of consider myself like a, spiritual hippie. I pray and I meditate. I do yoga and, practice meditation and teach it, right? And we can incorporate our religious practices in our practice on the mat. Absolutely. When I teach meditation, I can teach it from a spiritual perspective. Like if you're doing a mantra meditation, it doesn't have to be Sanskrit. It can be a scripture. And taking away this image of when we're meditating, we are worshiping some other God, and that's not necessarily true.
Yeah. Or we're opening up other portals.
Yeah, right? Like you can open up your spiritual portal to God while you're practicing yoga, while you're meditating, while you're being mindful. And I think that that's something that's really important in addition to the talk therapy. So talk therapy and prayer are really important tools. Yes. But I have a lot of clients, when they come in hot. And before we can even start, I'm like, okay, let's take a moment.
Yeah, you got to ground them.
We got to get grounded.
Yeah. Let's meditate. And their whole spirit changes, right? And they come in and they come to us for the spiritual aspect. Yeah. And that's first and foremost. But we can also incorporate these other tools. That's right. And they're like amazed. They're like, oh, I'm Christian and I can meditate? Yeah. And it's like a light bulb goes off. And I remind them, meditation is not demonic.
That's right.
Right. Jesus meditated. He went into the garden. He was silent. I'm so glad you talked about silence. Yeah. I practiced silence diligently for a long time. I've kind of gotten away from it, but every month for one day, I would go and practice silence at a monastery. Wow. It was life-changing. It was a religious experience. I would walk in the garden. It had a labyrinth, and God was speaking directly to me while I was in silence, practicing mindfulness and just meditating. And so I want to kind of encourage people, like, you can meditate and pray. Yeah. You can love Jesus and sit on your yoga mat and tap into those different things. Yeah. And being mindful is something important to say, okay, I'm going to be still and just check in with my body so that I can be mindful if I'm becoming dysregulated, if my breathing is off, if my heart rate is off. And then you can implement the other techniques. That's right. Because if I'm not still and quiet and know what my breathing is like when I'm okay, when I'm off the scale, I can't bring myself back enough quick enough until I'm like off the scale and I'm like, okay, how can I breathe? How can I do this? But if you have those things in place, which we all talk about with all of our clients, have strategies in your toolbox. Yeah. So when these things come up, you can say, okay, I'm going to pray. Okay, now I'm going to meditate. Okay, now I'm going to just be silent. Yeah. And you already have things that you can pull to help you. And tapping too, we haven't talked about tapping.
We haven't talked about tapping.
But I've shared that with some of my clients as well. Tapping is another great strategy for dealing with anxiety. Yes. We won't go into all the details, but you literally are tapping on the meridians of the body or some pressure points. And there's different ones that you I know you're all like, what is she doing? But there's different tapping points throughout the body. To help reduce the anxiety, reduce the stress.
That's right.
But also you're tapping into certain parts of your body that help with regulation of the stress and anxiety.
Yeah.
So, and breath work too, the breathing techniques
Breathing
and bringing
is
your
big,
breath back into a regulated pattern. So all of those strategies, in addition to, as I said, praying and because I want people to know, like, it's really important to know that you can couple these things together.
Absolutely.
And when we talk about meditating, you can meditate on the word.
Yes.
So if that's what you want to do,
and that's what the word tells us to do,
meditate
right?
on the word.
Well, one of the things that I share with my clients as well is understanding the difference between isolating and solitude. When we isolate, typically we are alone with our own thoughts. So whatever that negative thought, whatever that thought is, you become the expert, and that's the thought that drives you.
Yeah.
But in solitude, it's always directed somewhere else.
Yeah.
So that it's scripture or it's prayer or it's something. It's just the thoughts are directed somewhere else. So that's one of the questions that I ask people when they are experiencing some symptoms is, are you isolating, or do you take time to be in solitude?
Yeah. And I think that goes to being mindful too. So like a lot of people are like, what's the difference between mindfulness and meditation? Mindfulness is being aware.
Yes.
And meditation is focusing.
Yes.
So if we can be aware, then I can put my attention and focus somewhere else. So just kind of differentiating between that, because there's a lot of people who are like, well, I'm mindful. Okay, but are you checking in? And then what do you do once you check in? Where does your focus go? So that's kind of the same kind of thing. Are you isolating or are you in solitude? Kind of looking at different ways to look at things.
Absolutely.
And again, the beautiful part as we get ready to wrap up is that they're all congruent. Like they're all in a line, and they speak well to how God has designed us completely to be able to heal ourselves, right, as we depend on Him and all of the things that help bring this addedness to our lives, right? So listen, we're going to have to come back, of course, maybe in an episode of Mental Health in the Sacred Sanctuary. You'll definitely see Marcia again, helping us navigate and chart the focused topic of yoga, mindfulness, and meditation. So perhaps sometime, if not this year, next year, but we'll get it in. And hopefully we'll even bring yoga to Alfred Street. Let's see. Listen, you keep praying and we're going to keep working. But more importantly, if you don't walk away with anything else, I would urge you to take a moment and just do a journal entry and ask yourself, what do you know? What do you know now about anxiety? How has this information helped you? And what are your next steps? We are praying for you. We are compassionately making space for you. If you are a member of Alfred Street Baptist Church and you would like to connect with the Counseling Center, please reach out to us at pastoralcounseling@alfredstreet.org. Until the next time, be safe, be blessed, be well.